So what is Ozempic and why is everyone going crazy about it? So Ozempic was originally released as a diabetes medication, but it was discovered that Ozempic has profound effects on weight loss. And now diabetics are actually having a very difficult time getting Ozempic because it's being sold more for weight loss rather than for diabetes management. So how does Ozempic help with weight loss and diabetes? Ozempic is referred to as a GLP-1 agonist. GLP-1 is referred to as an incretin hormone, and it's released by specific cells at the end of our small intestine and our large intestine. What's important to know is the location of these cells. So our digestive tract starts with the esophagus, goes down to the stomach, and then connects to the small intestine, which is about 20 feet long, and finally connects to the large intestine. And it's at the very end of the small intestine and close to the large intestine that the cells, called L cells, that produce GLP-1 are located. And GLP-1 is produced when these cells are actually stimulated by different food particles. These foods include long-chain fatty acids from the fat that we eat, glucose and fructose from the carbohydrates we eat, and amino acids or peptides, which are just small chains of amino acids, from the protein that we eat. And finally, from short-chain fatty acids that are produced by our gut bacteria when they digest fiber. All of these different molecules can actually enter into the cells that produce GLP-1 located in our small and large intestine, and through a series of events will actually allow these cells to release the GLP-1 into our bloodstream. And what GLP-1 does is extremely interesting. GLP-1 will actually decrease our appetite, increase the production of insulin, which allows us to quickly lower our blood glucose, and it will actually inhibit what's referred to as gastric emptying. And this is simply just the evacuation of food on the porcelain throne. This means food will stay in our intestinal tract longer and make us feel fuller for a little bit longer. And this is a physical sensation of fullness, but the GLP-1 will also act on our brain and cause a psychological feeling of fullness. And it does this by increasing the activity of appetite-suppressing neurons inside of our brain. What Ozempic does is it's actually an injection that you take that will bind to the same GLP-1 receptors and cause the same cascade, except you don't actually have to eat any food in order to cause this effect. Therefore, these individuals have lowered blood glucose and have profoundly diminished appetites, allowing for diabetes management and fairly positive weight loss results. I do have a few comments about taking Ozempic. The first is that a lot of the recent studies have come out to show that the amount of weight that's actually lost from muscle is more than someone who is simply just using a calorically restricted diet and not using GLP-1 medications. When we lose weight, most of the time we'll end up losing some proportion from fat and some proportion from muscle. And GLP-1 simply seems to increase the amount of loss from muscle rather than fat. We still lose fat, but we also lose a little bit extra muscle. But I think what's a little bit more important is that we can mimic our own GLP-1 release simply by the foods that we eat. The first part of this video is simply just me explaining how we naturally produce GLP-1. And some foods stimulate the release of GLP-1 more than others. I did mention the location of these GLP-1 producing cells. They are located at the end of our very long small intestine, meaning somehow the food has to travel all the way down our small intestine without being absorbed to interact with these GLP-1 producing cells. To do this, we would need to eat foods that are a little bit more difficult to digest and break down. So something like candy or soda is going to be digested extremely rapidly, and this is why you don't really feel full after eating these foods. But foods with a little bit more of a complex structure will take a little bit longer to digest and interact with these GLP-1 producing cells. What's even more interesting is we can simply just change the structure of the exact same type of food to either increase or decrease its ability to act on these GLP-1 producing cells. For example, let's say we take an apple. An apple has a fairly complex structure and has a lot of fiber, which means it will be much more difficult to break down and will take more time and travel farther down our small intestine. But if we take that very same apple and juice it, the speed of absorption makes it such that most of it, if not all of it, is going to be absorbed in the upper part of our small intestine. And there's simply just not enough time for it to even make it far enough down our small intestine to stimulate the GLP-1 cells. And it's not because juicing takes anything out of the apple, but it simply just changes the physical structure enough that it's digested a little bit easier. The same thing is true from taking a potato and turning it into a potato chip. Or maybe instead of choosing a full intact protein like chicken or steak, you decide to take a whey protein shake. So if you're looking to increase your natural GLP-1 production, choosing foods in their whole form instead of foods that have undergone a degree of processing. But let's say you're struggling to put on weight because of your appetite. Purposefully choosing foods that are a little bit more broken down before you eat them can help decrease this GLP-1 and appetite suppression effect. For example, let's take a steak. Let's say you're trying to increase your satiety, you would eat the whole intact steak. But let's say you struggle with appetite, you would actually take this steak and turn it into ground beef. Even this minor amount of processing can make it a little bit easier to digest. And this is just one of a myriad of examples that can help us get to a specific goal. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out for me for personal coaching. But since a lot of people have the goal of increasing satiety when they're trying to lose weight, purposefully choosing foods that are in their whole food form, instead of choosing things that we think are healthy like fruit juices, vegetable smoothies, and whey protein shakes, can allow us to get this natural GLP-1 production and maybe not have to resort to taking Ozempic, the GLP-1 agonist.